All right, all right, all right. Welcome to the bridge. What's going on, sister?
What's happening, Brother Darryl? Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. All right. So, so listen. Today we've got a few things going on, but the biggest part of our topic was inspired by LeBron James and the news that his school is failing. Now I know a lot of people are going to try to talk trash about the brother, but he put his literally put his money where his mouth is. Started a school. Um, we still haven't heard anything from Dr. Umar. I'm gonna stop calling that clown doctor. From Umar Johnson um, about his when his school is opening. But LeBron did his thing, and so I know a lot of people want to try to say why the school is failing. They want to say it's because LeBron didn't know what he was doing. Maybe he put the wrong people in place. They probably want to talk about the kids and say that the kids are problematic. It's a whole lot deeper than that, but also a whole lot simpler than that. The reality of it is, we just don't have the foundation to do a lot of the things that we want to do, which is why we don't have a lot of hardcore voter interest and voter participation. We just don't have the foundation. Uh, we don't have a whole lot of entrepreneurial movement. We just don't have the foundation. And so that becomes the deal with a lot of things. And so before we get into it, come on, sister.
Well, it there are first of all, I let me back up a little bit. I do want to give make sure that we are giving LeBron his props because
Absolutely.
it is absolutely critical to um to express and acknowledge gratitude and the fact that folks within our community, particularly of celebrity status, are doing something to try to or place an effort in terms of trying to solve issues within our communities because there are so many um, problems within our community. And the other thing is that often we hear a lot of people outside, external and internal to our community say, well, these people don't owe us anything. They can do whatever it is with their money. I think people can do whatever it is they want with their money, but I absolutely think it's a falsehood to say that they don't owe us anything.
Right.
Because regardless of what any single black person has accomplished, they didn't do it alone. There was some involvement in their community, support from their community, from their families, etc. So this idea that that we don't owe our collective is hogwash. I couldn't think of another word to say.
Hog. Hey, it's what it is. It's
But
hogwash. Hogwash.
I pulled that. I don't know where I pulled that one out of, but it's hogwash. So basically, wanting to acknowledge, um, what he set out to accomplish.
That's right.
But I think the point that you're making about what we lack in our foundation is fundamental to the conversation of us problem solving in general.
Absolutely. Yeah, because there's a lot of people want to take the easy answer and say, you know, um, he didn't know what he was doing. Uh, um, they didn't say that about Oprah. When Oprah chose to ignore the black children here and go to Africa, um, which it was okay for her to do that. I mean, it was okay for her to do anything, but uh, I wouldn't have criticized her to just go to Africa or wherever, start a school and do her thing. It's her money, it's her time, do it. But she had to be a smart ass, you know. Yeah, well, I had to do it in, Africa, because in America, these kids, they want iPods and they want this and they want new shoes, and and over there they don't care about that. Well, her dumb ass found out really, really quickly that children are children. And when she went over there, that's one of the biggest problems that she faced. That's what they were focused on. They wanted um, the shiny stuff. Grown-ups want it. Youth want it. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. That's part of humanity. The reason why it failed in South Africa was the same reason why LeBron's piece failed, because when you go into a community, particularly an impoverished community where they don't have a whole lot going on, and you put up a shiny new school, it seems like it would just work. It would just be like, bam, they're all going to go, they're all going to benefit, and it's going to be a good turnout, and everybody's going to have a good time. But what people don't understand, I think it was Gandhi's racist ass. He said that for some people, they are so hungry, God can only appear in the form of a piece of bread, right? And so when you start talking about a school, when you start talking about dropping what should be crucial resources in the community, it's kind of hard for a child to see it, kind of hard for a student to really take advantage of it and understand it if they can't eat and if they don't have any place to sleep. So, if in fact you are starving and you fear for your life, because you don't have any place to be safe, it's kind of hard to go to school. Now we know some students are just amazing human beings, and no matter what's going on, their family might be sleeping in the car, and they're at home getting beaten, and they're not eating on a regular basis, but they show up to school and they're getting straight A's. But that's not everybody. A lot of human beings, especially young human beings, they don't have it like that. It is a horrible situation that they have so many challenges. And so I want to make it clear, I'm not one of those Negroes who says, LeBron, you got money, go in there and fix everything. Those are people who need to be slapped, maybe punched. I'd like to kick them around a little bit, because what LeBron did, and I'm glad you magnified it, what he did was a beautiful thing. He's a beautiful human being, but someone else has to come in, because society is failing our community. And so other entities need to come in and address the foundation. The foundation, the very bottom of the foundation, is you need to be able to eat and you need to be safe, so that school matters, because school is up here, very basic. The foundation is being able to eat, or you pointed out when we were talking the other day, and I don't know what school that was you were talking about, where the students, their challenge was they didn't have clean clothes. Where was that at?
That was in Newark, and under I believe his name, I believe his brother's name is Principal. I want to say Akbar Cook. I
Okay.
think the last name was Cook. Just an incredible human being, really understanding um, how to get kids. And well, for one thing, they had a high absentee rate, and he realized that his children were not coming to school because many of them, one, didn't feel safe, two, they were being bullied because they didn't have clean clothes. Like, that's real.
And he had a realistic solution.
He had a
What was
realistic solution
the
was they put commercial grade washers and dryers in the schools. And, they've had tons and tons of donations for, things like, you know, washing powder and those kinds of things. And then he started opening up the schools on Friday evenings. I want to say from like 5 to 10 or 5 to 11, something like that. And then I think it's 3 days during the summer, so that they have some place to come, where they have some place to be young people, without concern for their safety, and they, get hot meals, and they get to be students,
Yeah.
right? They get to be young people. So that was a realistic solution. And the thing is that it wasn't about trying to, in that moment, raise test scores. It was like, how do we get our kids here? Like, and so that's also, that brings also the question of how do we measure success, and how do we measure progress?
Mhm. Yeah, well, one of the things that I wanted to point out, you talked about Newark. Newark is a city that is being very progressive with its blackness under Ras Baraka, the son of Amiri Baraka. Um, that brother is, he's doing some things as far as it's not called gang intervention anymore. We have actual former gang members who are working with qualified professionals to go into the community and create safety. So to hear that one of the schools is being progressive um, about the education of young black people is uh, is pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Again, that principle addressed the foundation, and the results were, Denise, did that increase the
Yeah.
attendance
And
and
yeah, and he at that time he was definitely, I mean, people around the country were looking at him and what they were able to accomplish, because
yeah,
I think that's really critical. And you pointed that out just a little while ago when you were talking about the quote that Gandhi made. And yes, he was racist. That's another show.
that's right. Yeah.
That's another show, but that's a legitimate quote. It's actually very profound. And and we don't always really understand what's at the core of um what it is that we need. Because first of all, people who um aren't invested us in us are the ones that are constantly trying to tell us what we need. So, like, that's the first thing. But when you look at the American school system, it's not just failing Black students; it's failing everybody, right?
Pretty much.
So you've seen some of the test scores of when you start disaggregating data. So it's failing everybody, and we have to be really clear about that. And when things fail everybody, you know that we're at the bottom of the barrel.
That's
And
right.
so and we're at the bottom of the barrel because we have issues and traumas, systemic racism, all of those things, anti-blackness, that are on top of an already failing educational system. So that's where we are.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's what the school wanted to address, but
yeah.
perhaps it didn't know it needed to address all of those things. Because, I mean, let's face it, charter schools are basically, saying to us, without saying to us, oh, well, if we just, have this school that focuses, there's this sort of laser focus, or this idea of putting into these students, this environment, this shiny environment where, everything is regimented, or everything is regulated, or, like, whatever their sort of mantra is going to be different. And we are seeing that that is not the case, because often you also see charter schools who will reject students because the students, for whatever reasons, are not performing where they think that they should be performing, and they will get rid of those students.
Yeah. And let me just well, first, Preston James, Dana O'Banion, what's good, what's good. But let me say this, a word about charter schools. I know that there's like big push right now where people are saying if you send your child to a charter school out of his area, you're taking resources from this, that, and the third. I've got a little bit of a twist on it. My son has been in private school all his life, and he is now in a charter slash magnet school, and so he's in the magnet portion of the charter school. My perspective is fight for your children. If there's a charter school available, you should try to get your son, your daughter in that school. You should try to get the resources. I mean, I paid for private school for years and years, so I am absolutely happy now to go into um, an area that isn't uh, isn't a 100% African American area. I'm gonna say it like that, and get access to quality education. Although, and it's not 100% black, but it's certainly a 100% white, because that's another portion of taking care of our children. You have to take care of their full humanity. And I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to send my son or my daughter to a diverse school. And to them, that means a white environment. And that's problematic too, because that environment is probably going to be very, very hostile uh, to them. And they may not be able to navigate it properly. But yeah, so the charter school system, I just wanted to make that commentary because I hear a lot of people say really, really reckless shit about parents who send their children to charter schools. And I'm like, hey, if you can access the resources that your tax dollars pay for, then that's what you should do. You should fight for the to get the very best for your child. So again, so back to the foundation. No, not back to it. That is part of the foundation. The foundation is being a parent who can properly advocate for your child. And unfortunately, some of our children just don't have that. So let me run down the list and you can add to the list, Denise. On the top of the list is sometimes their parents are just trifling ass people who just aren't really concerned because they're worried about things for themselves. Up under there, parents who themselves weren't very educated, didn't have the top of the top, and they just don't know. Uh, Up under that are parents who are working maybe two, three jobs, and they just don't have the time. So there are some reasons why the very foundation should be having a parent to advocate for you. Can you add anything to that list?
Yeah. So, well, before we run down the list, because all of those are important things. But I do want to go back to the charter school statement. So,
Okay.
I personally am not in general a supporter of charter schools, but that's not the issue. The
Mm.
issue is that I think you're right that as parents we have to be um, especially as black parents, right? We have to be willing to get the best resources that we can for our children. And I would never tell anybody not to access that. What I would say is, with in the same way that you have to look very closely at whether it's a public school, a private school, or a charter school, you got to look very closely at what it is that they're doing and what it is that they're providing, because just the number of being a charter school is not going to mean success. The number of
Absolutely.
being a private school is not going to mean success for your child. And so just
Absolutely.
understanding that.
Yeah.
But in terms of your list, I mean, all of those things, and more. The list continues. I think what we have to be mindful of, though, in terms of all of those things that are happening, right, is that there's this thing that's external to to our community, and that's that anti-blackness, that systemic racism, and it is in every facet of our lives, and that thing is ever present. Now, the reason why we continue to, for lack of a better word, suffer, and actually that probably is the perfect word, the reason that we continue to suffer is because they don't let up, right?
Yes.
If we had the space, if we had the space to be able to, it's really heal, right? And I was just talking to a really close friend about this. I'm almost stealing the words out of his mouth. If we had the time to heal, then we could address these things. We could figure out what it is that we need to do to support our communities, to provide the foundations that you're talking about. It's all of these things. None of this is new.
Right.
Black folks been working 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs, right?
Hmm.
We've had generations where uh, our parents or grandparents, somebody didn't even graduate from high school, or somebody couldn't read, and still yet we were doing better in terms of our education. So when we see that those that we're doing worse than, then we have to sort of figure out, like, what's the real big disruptor.
Yes. Well, the disruptor is the foundation. I mean, and so that's why I was going down the list. I mean, I agree with charter schools, whether it's charter, private, public. You do have to make sure uh, that the school is going to provide services, and sometimes that means that you have to go outside of your community, and that's what I've been doing. I mean, I make sure that the school is not 100% white, that it's a mixture, that it's a real diverse environment. Because if in fact you're not dealing with a diverse an environment of diversity, you're talking about some real problems. I mean, all black, that's okay, because if your kid is black and they're in a black environment, they're probably going to thrive if it's a good school that has good resources. But if you send your kids to all white schools, you can end up breaking them. That's just what a white environment does. I mean, quite frankly, I was being broken at the University of Iowa. And, I was trying to fight, but there was a whole lot going on that affected me differently from the people around me, including my own brother. And so I know that for a lot of our kids, when they're in elementary school or high school, they're being broken. I'll give an example, and then we can go back to that list. When my son was in second grade, for whatever reason, his mother hated his elementary school. She couldn't enumerate or expound on the reasons, but she hated it. She's like, we need to look at other schools. I didn't have any plans on leaving, but I was being diplomatic because she was still involved at that time. We went to a Lutheran school. Anybody who knows what that environment typically is the whitest of the lily whitest of the whitest. We talked to what would have the person that would have been his third grade teacher if we actually went there. And it was a comedy. It was like Three Stooges. So I'm standing there, my son's mom is standing here, the teacher's standing here. I asked the person, I was about to call her something else, a question. She literally would turn to my son's mother and answer to her. And she kept doing that. And finally, I just laughed and walked away. I mean, I already knew we weren't going to that school anyway. But the point is, she thought it was a good school. She claimed it was diverse. And when I got there, literally in that third grade picture, there was one little dot. And what we know that happens with a lot of our black students, they're in a completely white environment. The teacher will place them in the back, won't call on them, and then the claim is, oh, he doesn't participate. And you know we've got to do better in terms of not thinking white is right and just throwing our children in white environments because we think that that's going to be better. And that goes along with what you were saying as far as charter, private, or whatever. It's about the school and how the school uses its resources and how they're going to actually deal with your child, right? Because that's more important than the school itself. That's more important than, oh, it's a good name, it's a good area. I mean, there's so much more in choosing a school than just saying that's a good school. It may not be a good school for your child. So, but yeah, so if we want to go back to environment, can you add to that? I mean, to foundation. Can you add to? You have anything to add to that list that I was making, Denise?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can, because I almost feel like the list is doesn't have an ending, right? Because when you start thinking about, the foundation within our community, I mean, that means so very many things. I think the simplest way to discuss it is, what do we have access to, right? That really focuses on what our needs are, and not our needs people, as people of color, but specifically as Black people, right?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we don't even understand. And this is a perfect example. Like, I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, and Montgomery County, Maryland, and PG County are two of the richest counties in the country. But when you look at the test scores of Black kids and other indicators of Black children in those areas, they're indicators, whether it's test scores, AP classes, all of those things that we are told are indicators, graduation rates, etc. They mimic, to some degree, what we see in counties that have lesser resources, or where the children and their families may not be making as much money. So that could be Baltimore County, or even DC. So when that happens, then we have to take a step and say, okay, what's really going on? And that's when you understand that this thing about anti-Blackness and systemic racism, how much it permeates our daily lives and influences, or I shouldn't say influences, but interrupts what it is that we're trying to accomplish, what it is that we are trying to create within our own communities, especially when it comes to the betterment of our families. And essentially, these things are destroying our families. Our family structure has been under attack, under assault for several decades now. And so when that's like the most important institution for Black people, right?
Yeah.
Arguably the church would be the second. But in addition to that, when you as Black people are dealing with sort of like all of these competing forces, right? Something has to give. So a good example is, I remember several years ago, I was working on a project, and we had to go from, different cities, and we were trying to understand why the HIV rates were not lowering in certain communities, specifically Black communities, specifically among what the terminology is MSM, men who sleep with men, why those rates were not going down. And what we learned from the State Departments, right, is no matter what kind of programs you were putting in, all of these nice little cute programs, and, well, if you come here and if you do this and if you do that, and you just come in and you can get tested and you can do this, and like, no matter what cute, nice, shiny programs they had, to support these people, the one thing that the State Departments kept, excuse me, that the state health departments would say is, you're not dealing with what's really going on with these people. Some of them do not know where their next meal is coming from. Some of them do not know where they're going to sleep, right
Yeah.
next. Some of them are drug addicted. Some of them are in domestic violence situations. Some of them are unemployed. Like all of these things, right, that are happening in somebody's life. So seemingly this thing about I'm HIV positive and I can't, what am I supposed to be doing? Who am I supposed to be doing? What's the behavior you want me to change? I'm not thinking about that right now because guess what? I don't know where I'm going to sleep. I don't know where I'm going to put my head or where I'm going to put my head. Somebody's going to try to bash it in or whatever the case may be. And so that may sound a little extreme when we're talking about the issue with the I Promise school, but there's definitely, I think, a similarity in that we are talking about what this school and these kinds of initiatives don't address. Like what's really happening in our communities.
Yeah.
And a big part of why we don't get those things addressed, and I'm not saying that we don't address them, but we don't get those things addressed because first of all, it's external to us, right? So there are other people that are pulling levers, making these things happen and infiltrating our lives and having such a
Infiltrate.
horribly negative impact on our lives. So, what are we supposed to do? Like, what are we supposed to do? And you then have an agenda that says, but really, there's nothing wrong with your community. You just haven't worked hard
Yeah.
enough. You
Yeah.
haven't done what you're supposed to do. So then it becomes again the onus of us, which is absolutely crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And so the idea of having these kinds of initiatives, again, this is not, a criticism of LeBron, but it's just understanding that these are the kinds of things that they continue to do. White supremacy, white liberalism, whoever, you know, whoever was, because they're one and the same. Just draw a line. They just, they one and the same. Let's not forget
Absolutely.
that. You just pivot from one to the other, right? So the idea is to continue to make Black people think that something is inherently wrong with us because we can't pull ourselves up the bootstraps, or somehow we got three that made it. So why the rest of y'all 50 million y'all
Can't
can't,
get it
right,
together.
can't get it together? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
all of that absolves them of doing what they really should be doing, which is stop messing with us. Leave us
Right.
alone.
Right.
Stop messing with us. You ain't gotta fix what's wrong in our community, but you really need to stop messing with, stop creating problems within our community, right? Leave us alone. Let us heal. Let us take care of ourselves. Because guess what? We were doing it.
That's
When we walked off plantations and we built communities, whole cities, we were doing it then. And so the only reason we're not able to do that now is because you found out, hey, wait a minute, they walked off those plantations. And so it wasn't by accident we created a country, a whole country, right? The infrastructure and all of that. Because we had to force them to do it, and we probably had to tell them a little bit, we had to guide them. So now we're not underfoot anymore. They're not under our force and our brutalization and our violence, and they're still managing to do these things.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so this is what's happening. This is what's happening.
Well, one of the things I would add to the list then is the systematic. Well, let me just systematic shit talking, and the reason why the systematic negativity is problematic. It doesn't just come from external. Now we have adopted it, right? So it used to be where the government, the bureaucracy would say, "Hey, you have everything you need. What are you doing?" But now you hear other Negroes saying the same thing. Or I mean, like That's what they were saying about, LeBron's school failing. Oh yeah, well, them little Negroes, they don't want to do anything. They got everything they need. He was trying to give them something extra. They just don't care. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to succeed. Those kinds of things make it worse, not better, not better. And we gotta do better in terms of the conversations that we're having. Um, so I agree with you. The system, you know, that should be supporting and advocating for our children, for our students, systems broken. Did we lose you?
No, I'm trying to get. I'm thinking on it, and no. I mean, absolutely. So here's another example, and I don't know if you remember those one of those home shows. I'm not going to say the name of it because I actually don't really remember the name of it. But one of those home shows where the whole idea is you go in and you build a new home for somebody, and that they were living in a really bad home and they had really bad situations going on in their lives, and then all of a sudden you're gonna have this big beautiful home, and it has all these niceties and everything is gonna be wonderful. And so what they learned, okay, is that, wait a minute, like what, 12, 18 months, the home would basically look like what it looked like before it was revamped. And the reason is not because people are crazy, not because people are lazy, not because people somehow just don't have, housekeeping skills or anything like that. It's because you didn't deal with what was going on with them to get in that situation in the first place.
That's right.
So when you put this new shiny school in a neighborhood, right? That doesn't make everything else disappear, right? And I'm not saying that that's not important, because especially with so many of these schools looking like jails, we need to be able to do that, right?
Right.
So and so this is what was going on.
Yeah, and so I think at some point, if we don't start having the broader discussions, then things are going to continue to go downhill. It will also make it easier for the system, for the bureaucracy to pull resources out of our community, especially when we start to agree. That's why, like in the 90s, when the reparations discussions first started getting like really, really popular, started getting a lot of steam, people were angry with me because I was like, well, I know, and Tony Brown said it best. He said, I don't know what white people owe us, but I know one thing, they ain't going to pay. But my thing was, on top of that, all of these efforts toward trying to get someone to first change their mind, get them accustomed to the fact that you owe us, you need to pay. We were ignoring the fact that instead of just reparations, we needed to be repaired. And that repair has to come from us. Malcolm X said it. We ourselves have to lift the level of our community to where we want it to be. And we have to do that by changing our minds about each other, changing our minds about what our community actually is. And so, if we do that first and we start thinking differently, we can, again, it's not just that I picked reparations because I wanted to talk about how we needed to be repaired, but there are other things. This whole obsession with these filthy politicians, and black people have been beaten into a slave like state when it comes to politics. Like, fuck them damn Democrats. I know I was trying to be cool and, not really let loose, but I had to say that because black people continue to choose Democrats and the Democrats choose anybody. And this is not, I had to say this because so many people connected to politics are so stupid. I actually have to say No, this is not an advocacy for the Republican Party, but it is that we spend so much time pushing each other to vote, we don't push each other to understand why we're voting, who we're voting for, and we don't push ourselves into self advocacy so that we can tell the politicians that if you want our vote, here's what we need to get. Because we get nothing. Even, the golden child, Obama, said, hey, I can't really, I can't do like the Flavor Flav. He said, hey, I can't do nothing for you, man. But he, went to work. He went to war for the alphabet community. He went to war for people who are criminals. Yes, let me say it, criminals. If you are in this country because you jumped across a border, dug up under a border, did whatever, you came here, you are here illegally, you are a criminal. And he advocated for criminals. So, what was our legacy? That he told us two things. Number one, pull your pants up. Number two, a rising tide floats all boats, which ignores the fact that we have a hole in the bottom of our boat. But it also sounded like Ronald Reagan's trickle down theory, which basically was, I'm going to take care of my boys. The rest of y'all can go to hell because those are my boys. So we got to get away from just automatically giving up our vote. It was really, really shameful. We talked about this before. I'll probably talk about it again. It was really shameful that Black people got upset with Ice Cube when he said, here's my plan that I want a presidential candidate to say that they're going to get behind. And I don't care who gets behind it, whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats. Somebody needs to pay attention to us. And we got so caught up in the fact that so many of us are slaves to the Democratic Party that we couldn't understand that basically what they told Ice Cube by saying, wait until after the election, they were basically saying, nigga, go away. That's really what they were saying. Because after the election, nothing happened. Biden wouldn't meet with Ice Cube, but he met with that retarded prostitute, former prostitute who also drugged and raped men, Cardi B. So Cardi B didn't have an agenda. She's just some little goofball who basically is harmless. So if our foundation, and moving away from school but going back to it, if our foundation with politics is we are getting something tangible for our votes, then the voting process becomes a process that actually has substance, right? And that will actually have a real result because I am not, and we're going to find out in 2024 because a lot of people are where I am. You can no longer tell me just vote. You likely will get cursed out, and if you're standing in my face, I may assault you. You have to leave Black people alone with this just vote mantra because it isn't working for us. It didn't work with Obama, and it isn't working with Biden because the Biden administration, he and that tragic mulatto made it clear. Well, she made it clear before she was even VP. When she's running for president, she's made it clear, I'm not doing anything specifically for Black people. And then Biden was like, yeah, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. I mean, our foundation has to be number one across the board. Don't disrespect us, but our foundation has to be, we need to have our needs addressed because our voter turnout would be larger if that's what you want, if you address the fact that so many of us are in pain, so many of us are just not doing well, and that's got to be addressed before we get to the whole just vote, just support Democrats. Did I go too far off the rails with the? with my assault on the Democrats.
Yeah, no, you're not too far off the rails. But I do want to back up a little bit about the conversation about reparations.
Sure,
Will we get reparations in this lifetime? I personally don't think that we will. But that probably really doesn't matter, because every day that all of us breathe, we should be shouting to them reparations, because they are owed us without a doubt.
sure.
They live this entire country's economic system. Obviously, we speaking, to the preaching to the choir, was built off of our ancestors, but not
Yeah.
just our ancestors, right? The economic engine continues to run off of Black suffering, not
Yes.
Black labor, because that's just a part of it, but Black suffering. And so, yes, we are absolutely owed it. And then what I would say
No
about
doubt.
the issue about the repair, I probably would amend that just a little bit. And go back to, what we're talking about in terms of healing. We have got to be committed to gaining healing. And I remember I had an opportunity to interview um, Chairman Omali Yeshitela last year, and I asked him about reparations, and he was like, "We absolutely are owed reparations." And so my follow-up question to him was, "Do we need reparations in order to liberate ourselves?" And he said, "Absolutely not." And the reason behind that, or a reason behind that, is we've always had all of the tools that we need, right? What we haven't always had is a break from their trauma. And so we have got to understand that we are dealing with that trauma, and how we extract ourselves to the best extent that we can. So,
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I hope I didn't come off as being opposed to reparations. Just that I viewed the reparations movement similar to the whole vote Democrat uh, movement. That there's a lot of effort that I believe sometimes can sidetrack us because there's so much else that we need to do, and that goes back to the um, the platform of our discussion today, which is our foundation. We need to really get to our foundation. What are the things that we need? And those need to be addressed, whether they're being addressed to the system, addressed to these alphabet organizations, the NAACP, Urban League, and whoever else is getting money from the government. Um, we need to abolish the Black Lives Matter movement. Black lives do matter, but that organization does not. Um, and we need to really, really be more concerned about our foundation, what should be done, who should be addressing it. I'm going to throw churches in there. We ran down this list. I think the last show or the show before that, that we've got to get to the point where we start paying attention to who is getting resources to address our needs and what they're doing with those resources. And so that includes within and without the politicians and all the organizations inside that are getting money. We got to be careful with just giving people whatever they say they need, whatever support they say they need, and then we get nothing from them. That's a huge problem.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that I mean, there are several things, but one of the things that I do like about the reparations conversation is that it forces us to put on our lips the things that we do need, right? Like,
Yes.
where there are gaps, where there have been systematic stripping directly from our communities, right? And so it allows us to be able to continue to say out loud, unabashedly, that, hey, you have screwed up this public school system, and particularly warehousing Black students in schools across the country, whether it's in the suburbs or whether it's in, the most impoverished communities. This is what you do. You have continued to destroy the Black family, whether it's because you have taken Black men out of our homes and put them in jail, because that's what you do. Because again, this economic engine runs off of Black suffering, and so you create those situations. You create it seems like anything that allows them to make money is connected to our suffering, our labor, our being disenfranchised. And so that's one of, I think that is one of the most important, I think, aspects of the reparations conversation. Um, but when looking again at the foundation, which is where we originally started, and particularly with this LeBron thing, I hope that he does continue to not be discouraged. I think what my prayer and wish is that they really sit down and examine what is going on with where they need support. What are the things that may be barriers and maybe gaps? Because even as the media is describing it as failing, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been progress, and really being able to look at that. And then I would also, if I were him, I would be looking at a really invested Black communications company that would explain that, right? Because this is, and perhaps now this may have been one of the missteps, and that is, I do think that there was a possibility that he walked into this thinking that this is what we needed. Like, if we,
Yes.
like, there aren't, this will do it. This is sort of like the wand, we can wave it, and so these things are going to happen.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm not going to say he's completely blameless, but like 98%, because, this is not a man who was highly educated. This is a man who simply wanted to do something for his people. And that can't be a bad thing. I mean, we can't say, you know, LeBron did something wrong because he wanted to create a situation
Absolutely, absolutely.
where his people would do
Yeah.
better. I'm not gonna take anything away from him. I'm not gonna put him in the same um, bag with Umar. You know what I mean? I mean, this dude, he's
Yeah.
not like Umar. Umar raised a bunch of money that that he screwed off. Used it to take out those two young ladies that he's dating. He didn't use it to take care of those two children that he continues to ignore. Bastard. Um, but he messed off a lot of money. So he's not in this. LeBron is not in the same bag with that clown because LeBron used his own money, and that can't be a bad thing. So I hope that his team gets together and they decide to do an investigation into uh, the foundation uh, of the children in that school to see what they need to do. Whether that's creating an advanced tutoring program, an advanced mentoring program, to access the school should access a free lunch program from the bureaucracy because those tax dollars need to jump in there on behalf of the students to make sure that they're eating, to make sure that we can put black male mentors in front of them.
Okay,
Those are
say
the
that, repeat that again. That's
yeah
because
yeah
that's the other
yeah
thing that's just absent from our homes, our
yeah
communities,
absolutely
they
absolutely.
and schools.
Yeah, and this is one of the situations where people say, "Oh, you can't blame these poor single mothers because they're just doing the best they can." And sometimes that's bullshit. And I'm saying that before anybody gets upset. I'm saying that as a person who was a mentor and who ran several mentoring organizations. And I know that a lot of these single mothers don't want their children around black males. They, for whatever, a long list of reasons that I'm not even going to enumerate, but that's
Another
problematic.
show, different show.
Yeah, that's another show. It's another
Different
show.
show.
Yeah, that it's problematic that a lot of these single mothers just don't want that to happen and won't facilitate that. So, we gotta be careful with some of that, but it is absolutely crucial that we do more of it. I know the black fraternities do a lot. I know the Deltas had a program themselves where they created black male mentors.
Yeah.
That was powerful. So I'm
And
gonna give them their flowers.
yeah, and the thing is that, repeating without apology that our schools and communities need black men isn't in any way a slight against black women, but it's like, why would we not have black men in our communities and in our schools?
Right.
Every other community has that, and that family structure, and whether that's the family structure, meaning a woman and her husband, a husband and his wife and children, or even just in terms of figuratively, we have people serving in this sort of matriarch role and this patriarch role, and we are loving our community and providing guidance with both energies, right? And so every other community has that.
Yes.
So why is it that when we talk about it, it's looked upon like, well, we what? Or like it's some sort of offense or direct insult against women. So we got to get away from that, because nobody else is
Absolutely.
is shamed into thinking, wait a minute, just because you mention needing men, that somehow is a slight against women. So that is not, sisters, please, 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 it's not a slight. It's not a dig. It's reality, saying
Yeah.
we need that in our communities. We need that, black men present and visible and involved, and not in ways that we describe or we define or we tell them or we allow and permit them. No, as full partners.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. So yeah. So all those things are part of the foundation of what we need to deal with before just throwing these kids at a school, whether it's a public school, private, charter, whatever it is. And I hope that again, uh, LeBron's team can actually intelligently look at the things that are missing, the things that are problematic, so that they can start to address them. Even if the school doesn't address it on its own, like I said, they are part of a bureaucracy that needs to participate, because those students, their parents, are part of the tax base. Even if they're not currently working, at some point they worked, and most of them are working, and that needs to be addressed. So, anything else? Because we can go ahead and wrap this one up. Because
Yeah, no, like I said, I wish LeBron and his team the best. I urge all of us to keep that school community in their prayers, because I can't imagine what it must feel like to look at the news and say that are failing, or announce to the world that you've not been able to accomplish whatever standards they set out. Um, but I'm I hope that he has a team, as we've already said, that will really look very closely at what are the specific supports that these families need, to be able to support the children in
right,
their journey.
that's right.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Because anytime we do a study to see what's really going on, we find out that it's not the children just being lazy. It's not the children being stupid. It's the environment. It's the foundation that's problematic. So
right, yeah. And we know, someone was saying about, being able to get support from home. We had that. We understood that. We taught white people that, right? So we don't need them to teach us that. We don't need
That's
them to tell us that about being our kids' first teacher. What we need to understand is, what does it mean to be able to do that when we are continuously having them put their foot on our necks
that's right.
continuously without healing.
Without healing, without repair. And perhaps our next show can be on reparations because that's been on my mind lately. It's been on my mind. So, anyway, thank you, Denise, for another hot show. And
I
until next week,
appreciate you. All right. I appreciate you.
absolutely. I'll read
Okay.
a continue. So, we'll
Peace.
talk next week. Peace. All right.